We have been experiencing some technical difficulties with the audio and the camera. We hope that this comes out as clear as other episodes, but please bear with us if it's not exactly the same as our other recorded episodes with Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brut. Welcome back, Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brut. We are a week before Rosh Hashanah, 5785 Tavshin Pei Hey. We have a special episode about the minhag of not sleeping on Rosh Hashanah. This episode has been graciously dedicated by Rabbi Yisrael Gordon in honor of Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brut for the work he's done collecting and publishing the works of Rav Moshe Reinis Zatzal. We thank Rabbi Gordon for this dedication. If anybody else would like to dedicate an episode or has a suggestion, please reach out to myself, Shueib@ou.org or eliezer@gmail.com. I would like to add, if you are not yet on Rabbi Brut's list where he sends out primarily before Yom Tovim articles and news forum, you could email him as well to join that list. So we thank the Gordons for the dedication. Just one last message. It is before Rosh Hashanah. If you'd like to send a Shana Tova message to any of our Maggidei shiur, including Rabbi Brut, go on to our website, alltorah.org/Shana Tova. We have a form there. You could send a message directly to any Maggidei you would like. They appreciate these messages, even though most of them don't know or see the people listening to the shiurim. Every one of these messages means a lot to them, even if it's just a thank you and your name. So please go to alltorah.org/Shana Tova and send a Shana Tova message. Without further ado, Rabbi Dr. Brut.
Now, giving over and preparing this shiur has been one of the hardest of any of the shiurim that I've recorded to date. And the reason is simple. I've pretty much spent many years researching this topic. I fell into this rabbit hole and I've never gotten out of it. I feel that the time allotted to speak about it cannot do it proper justice, but that's life. So I'm going to try to mention broadly some of the sources for this topic. When I was young, at some point, I heard about it from my grandmother. She would say, "Mishlaf nicht on Rosh Hashanah, as your mazel is going to sleep." At the time, I assumed it was one of these old wives' tales that some said, just like, not to whistle, yid pfeif nicht, and all these other types of things. When you get a little older, you start learning Shulchan Aruch, whatever, Mishnah Berurah, and you see it's open Rama in Hilchos Rosh Hashanah. Steht in Rama, Siman Tov Kuf Pei Gimel, Vegam Noyagin Shaloi Lishon B'Yoyim Rosh Hashanah. Then there's this parentheses that says Yerushalmi, Uminig Nachin Hu. So, even though it says this Yerushalmi, does not necessarily mean that the Rama wrote it. It seemed most likely the parentheses is not from the Rama. Okay. So basically we see that there was a minhag not to sleep. It says specifically in the day of Rosh Hashanah, and the Rama adds in 3 words, Uminig Nachinu. So first of all, he never uses such language. He doesn't go out of his way. Even though the Rama is famous, we've discussed this in other episodes, he goes very into minhagim, but he doesn't spell out that it's a minhag nachan. Fine. Is there something unique to this minhag? Question. Is this just Tama minhag? Is there an Isser? Because if you look in certain paiskim, it sounds like it's more like it's maybe even some type of Isser. When is it? Is it during the day or the night? Lamashal, the Rama says clearly it's during the day. What's the reason behind it? I just said it says Yerushalmi, but it's not Yerushalmi. Or maybe it is Yerushalmi. And like always, for centuries, we had certain sources, and then different sources come to light as time goes on. And today, hopefully, we'll discuss some new Nukudis in this topic. When is this Isser? Biyoim? When does that start? Does it start from the morning when the day begins? What about after Chatzos? What about the second day? And last, what about Aseres Yimei Tshuva? And there's many other questions that come up, and we're going to briefly touch on some of these today. Fine. So everyone knows when you're learning a Rama, what's the first place you look? You look in the Darkei Moshe. It says the Darkei Moshe. This is his work on the Torah. He says, Yerushalmi de Rosh Hashanah. So here he's giving it that it's Yerushalmi. And where is it? In Rosh Hashanah. Isa, hay man de damech berei shaita, damech Maaglei. U'lechein nizaron shaloi lishon beRosh Hashanah. So here, it's interesting. It sounds like you're not to sleep on Rosh Hashanah. It doesn't say, no longer does it say those words biyayim, which the Rama in the Shulchan Aruch changed and added. Furthermore, it's now giving us some context where it's coming from, supposedly Yerushalmi in Rosh Hashanah. And the third thing is what's behind it is like this, because when you don't sleep when you're Berei Shaita in the beginning of the year, because if you do, your mazel is going to sleep. Not that I could claim to understand what those words mean, but that's what it says. Fine. So this is the Rama, and he says it's Yerushalmi. Fine. An earlier source than the Rama was a Chibur Maaglei Tzedek, I've quoted in the past, which was a work of halacha published in Samach Zayim right before the Rama. The Mechaber dies in 1559. It's a good chance the Rama saw this work, but the relationship between the Rama and this particular work needs to be investigated. I'm in the midst of investigating it in general. But in 1559, the Mechaber is Nifter, and in 1560, this is basically 13 years before the Rama is published, he publishes the following. He says, B'Yerushalmi Amru, so he does not say it's in Rosh Hashanah. He says, Al Chad Barnash, the Damach Berei Shaita, on someone who's sleeping when they are doing is vidinin yasei. So now he says he doesn't talk about damich mazlei, that you're mazel sleeping. You're not to sleep when there is a shastin. Then he says, based on this, Yerushalmi mikan nagu sheloi lishan bimei Rosh Hashanah. So he's going back to the day, which again is what the Rama originally said. Fine, so you see something's going on. Now the question is, and we're not going to deal with all the technical aspects, is it the same source, not the same source? I am pretty convinced this is not the source of the Rama, even though the Rama could have seen it, and they have different sources. What the source of the Maaglei Tzedek, we will see. Okay. Bottom line is, according to both of them, it's Yerushalmi. And if you look further on in the main Noise Kalim, let's say the Taz says, the Isi Yerushalmi, man the Damach Bereishai, the Damach Maaglei. The Bir Hagra, who's famous for putting the earliest sources that he knows on a topic, he says over here, it's Yerushalmi. Again, so it sounds like pretty simple, it's open Yerushalmi. The problem is, and we'll get to this later on, is we checked the Yerushalmi high and low, and hundreds of people have checked, and there is no such Yerushalmi in our standard Yerushalmi. Fine. Lamaisa, going a little further, the Lavush, who is famous for bringing his Rebbe, the Rama, a lot of material from him and adding to it, and he's very, very into Minhag. He doesn't even talk about this, which is very strange. We don't find this so common. Is there a reason for it? We move a little further. The Matei Moshe, Talmud of Marshal, he says, Noigen Shaloi Lishan Shinas Tzarayim Rosh Hashanah. So he's already giving a time frame for it. And then he says, Yesh Ktsas Smach LeMinhag Zeh Me Adam Rinam B'Yerushalmi. And he brings down the Yerushalmi, like it says in the Maaglei Tzedek, which he did happen to own. We know this from other places. Vidani Yasi, that you don't sleep while there's a din going on. Then he says, This is a famous line that we have in many other sources. The Yosef Aimitz, we quoted also in the other episodes of Dayan and the Bezdin of the Shla. Okay, so now at this point, we're not seeing any Isser. We're pointing out to some clarity in what's the source and what's the reasoning. So now it sounds like, and we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of this, but basically like this. Some people hold it's problematic to sleep. Why? Very simple. If you sleep on Rosh Hashanah, your mazel is also going to sleep. And what that means is, it's not your mazel bad luck. It's more like you have a malach taiv that's melitz for you when there is a din going on, and that will be sleeping if you're sleeping. And that's what it has to do with. And therefore, that's only when the din is mamish happening. So let's say we will establish what time the din happens on Rosh Hashanah. That's where it will be, and possibly after Chatzos. Some people will suggest that the din is the din is not happening after Chatzos. So then you'll be able to sleep in the afternoon. That will be the possibility, and that's how they understand this. And you could see where it's coming from in the Rama, because the Rama says it's the damich berei shaita, damich mazlei. Okay, others suggest. It's not about your mazel is going to sleep or your malach toiv is going to be. It's basically like this. There's a yom din happening. If someone sleeps on Rosh Hashanah, he's showing that he doesn't have a fear of and pachad of the din. And according to this, it would sound like it doesn't make a difference. Not the afternoon. The whole day you shouldn't be able to sleep. According to that, after Chatzos. According to that, some say maybe even at night. Okay. So this is the bare bones of the reasoning behind the minhag. Okay. So first, I keep on saying, what about the night? If you look at if you look at the way the Rama brings down the Yerushalmi, the Rama says, so already in the Chuvas Mei Noyach, a beautiful Chuvas Sefer, Litvish Rav, published in 1881, he says, Pashtas Divi Yerushalmi Mashma the Gambelil Rosh Hashanah you should not sleep. And then he says, Nimtzam Anshe Maisa Noigin Shaloi Lishim Belel Rosh Hashanah. There were people, he was aware of people that did not sleep Belel Rosh Hashanah. So the question is, are there others? So we have to say this for Rabbi Shueib. The Kloisenberger, it's brought down. It sounds like he took the Yerushalmi Kepshuta. He did not sleep on Rosh Hashanah even at night. Others, the Chemes Yaman brings down. We have other sources from other Kehilos that some people in Algiers, Lamashal, they did stay up and they were Isaac learning and Putim the whole night of Rosh Hashanah. But Lamaisa, most people did not. Now there's two Nakudis for this. Number one is, when does the din start? What does that mean? Does it then start at night? So we have a strong indication, a famous Gemara that's brought for this conversation is a Gemara in Brachas, Taf Yud Ches Amud Beis, with a Ma'aseh b'chassid echad shenasam dinner la'ani be'erev Rosh Hashanah. And basically his wife found out about it, and she threw him out of the house, and he goes, V'halach v'lon be'beis hakvaris. And when he's there, Shamash te ruchos shemasaper zu zu, and they tell them he overhears them saying what was already paskin in Shamayim. Now, when was this? He's sleeping in the Beis HaKfaris, Leil Rosh Hashanah, according to the Pashtus. So he's overhearing what was said already. So it sounds like there was some type of din already, Leil Rosh Hashanah. And we're going to get back to this Gemara a little bit. There's a lot to say about this Gemara, if this Gemara is really even happening, Leil Rosh Hashanah. But for now, for today's focus, it's Leil Rosh Hashanah or some other choices. Now, the point is, so we see that there's a din Leil Rosh Hashanah, which would fit with the Anhag of the Kloisenberger or what the main Noach is bringing down. But as Rabbi Ephraim Zalman says, Pashtus of the Yerushalmi it's talking about Shinas Hayoim, because the Laila, the night, is created for sleeping. It's the standard time when people sleep, and we have befurish Gedolim. Many Gedolim slept. We have this through Derech Agav. Lamashal, the Knesset Gedolah in Siman Tov Kuf Tzadik Zayin talks about a dream that he had on Leil Rishon of Rosh Hashanah, and he wasn't sure if he has to fast till Tanis Kaloim, and he went to ask a Shaila. We have others. We have the Beis Yosef, the Maggid of the Beis Yosef, where we have dreams of the Beis Yosef. So it sounds like he also slept, and the Pashtus is people sleep on Leil Rosh Hashanah. But as I said, this is if you're taking the Yerushalmi literal out of safe. Okay, but Ad Kan, we've spoken about this minhag. We've discussed this Yerushalmi. And we mentioned this, we don't have this Yerushalmi. Is there any good sources, early sources for this minhag besides the Rama, Maaglei, Tzedek? So the Bach, first published in 1640, he brings down that there's a sefer known as the Ibn Shueib, and the Ibn Shueib says, Mikan kasav b'Yerushalmi she'aser la'adam lishayin b'Rosh Hashanah k'da'amar hasam eich barnash t'damich b'rei shaita v'oiskim b'dina. This is what he brings down from Rabbi Yeshua ben Shueib. And then he says, the Maram was Ragil Lishon Kemoy B'Shar Yantif, Tajbitz, Matzasi Ken Kasav Hagois Marash Luria. Fine. So we see from here a few pieces of very important information. Number one, we now have what's possibly the earliest source for this minhag, and that is Rabbi Yeshua ibn Shueib. Who is Rabbi Yeshua ibn Shueib? He's a Talmud of the Rashba. We don't know much about him, but we know he was a tremendous, tremendous person. Professor Carmi Horowitz devoted a whole full-size book on him. A very interesting book. And basically, we have his drashas that he gave. It seems he gave them every week. We don't know exactly all the details. Drashas ala Torah and on the Mayadim. And it's been published a few times. They're simply incredible, as we're going to talk a little bit more about them soon. Now, even though by today, many people know, what's the earliest source of Shin Rosh Hashanah is Rabbi Yeshua ibn Shueib, very few people went ahead and opened up to Rabbi Yeshua ibn Shueib and saw the context of what Rabbi Yeshua ibn Shueib is talking about. For the most, people knew about it either through secondary or third sources or through this Bach, which is fine. But it wasn't such a common sefer. It was published only in the 1500s, published twice, and then that was it. So the question is Rabbi Yeshua ibn Shueib the Makar for the Rama? Now, it sounds like possibly yes, but the Lashonis of Rabbi Yeshua ibn Shueib, if you look at it very carefully, and the Lashonis of the Rama, when the Rama tells you to Yerushalmi Rosh Hashanah, it doesn't sound like it's the same thing. Furthermore, if the Rama had that this Yerushalmi, if that the source is from Rabbi Shueib ben Shueib, he probably would have said so. And I would have think he would bring from him more. He got to say for one time. There's so much more very important information, testimonies about Rabbi Shueib ben Shueib's Rebbe, the Rashba, that he brings down different. Okay, so now the point is the Rama. If the Rama's Makar is from Rabbi Shueib ben Shueib, how does he know about it? Lamaisa was published in the 1520s. Was the first time Rabbi Yeshua ben Shueib was published. Maybe the Rama had it, maybe not. Lamaisa was published in Krakow right after Rama. Fine. Lamaisa, the Maaglei Tzedek, who we said is the earlier source than the Rama for this minhag. It's clear he did have the Rabbi Yeshua ben Shueib. We have this from other possible places, and from this lashon also, it sounds like his makar is Rabbi Yeshua ben Shueib. The question is, Rabbi Yeshua ben Shueib, Talmud the Rashba, this is a Svardi makar, and we don't have any Svardim. The lashon the Beis Yosef doesn't bring this down. Interestingly enough, the Beis Yosef seem to have seen the Rabbi Yeshua ben Shueib. He brings it down for something else. Why not? This is a different question. We don't know why. Okay, but Lamaisa, bottom line is this Bach. Once we have this Bach, this was a game changer because we have now Rabbi Yeshua ben Shueib bringing from Yerushalmi. Now, many people do not bother to go look further once we now have the Rabbi Yeshua ben Shueib b'Shem Yerushalmi, because it was common enough that Rishayim bring things from Yerushalmi and we don't have it. But even furthermore, many people were not bucking Yerushalmi, so you could say it's Yerushalmi, and people didn't know Yerushalmi was not so well learned even after the printing press. Lamaisa, the Bach brings down at the end over here in this piece that we call. Not only does he bring down that the Rabbi Yeshua ben Shueib and what the makar for this Yerushalmi and what's going on behind it, which we'll discuss, but he says that the Maram Rothenburg, what did he do? He slept on Rosh Hashanah, like all Yom Tovim. And it's interesting because this Bach is quoted as a strong kula by many. Lamashal, the Pri Chadash, he brings down the Bach, he brings Rabbi Yeshua ben Shueib, and he says, we're noig like this maram to sleep. Means he thinks it's really better not to sleep. But Lamaisa, we have what to be makel. The Maram Rothenburg slept. Marshal the Shulchan Gavaya says, fine. Also because of this Pri Chadash / Bach. Fine. We mentioned already early on that the Levush, strangely enough, does not bring this down. Says the Elia Rabbah, because he holds like this Bach, b'shem the Marami Rothenburg, that he slept, and therefore he didn't have to bother to bring it down. Beseder. But the question is, do we have other Gedolim that Taka slept? So the answer is, we have Lamashal, the Leked Yosher, which we've already discussed numerous times in different episodes. It was only published from manuscript a little more than 100-something years ago. This is that the Trumas Hadeshen also slept, similar to Marami Rothenburg. Fine, but we have no idea if the Marami Rothenburg slept or that the Trumas Hadeshen slept is because they knew this Yerushalmi and they held still you could sleep, or they didn't even know about this Yerushalmi. That's a possibility. Anyway, many people bring down Reb Chaim Vital, Talmud of Arizal says, Ani Zeicher, Sharaisi Lemoiri, Shacher Chatzais Hayom, Shachav al Mitasai V'Yashan. He went to sleep. So this, many people bring down. We have, not only do we have the Marami Rothenburg, not only do we have us today, the Trumas Hadeshen, but we now have that Arizal slept. Says the Mata Ephraim, the Elif Lamat. You want to bring a raya from the Arizal? Halavai sheyir b'yicholeseinu lasis k'maseu b'hoketz echad minei elav b'mashu zal misaken b'shinasai. In the Arizal sleep, he's being misaken oilamos. So don't bring me rayas from the Arizal. And in general, many times we find that this is a huge discussion. Let's say now we know the Arizal did something. What does that have to do with us? The Arizal, he could sleep. Whatever reasons not to sleep, he could sleep. And it's possible to explain this based on something very well known. There's numerous sources for this, that basically when the Arizal used to sleep, he was Isaac and learning the whole time. Talmidim would listen and they would hear him talking and learning, and we have a lot of different makayos to such a thing. Similarly, you can include this probably that the Marami Rothenburg and the Trumas Hadeshen also, when they went to sleep, they were learning. Lamashal, the Gra writes that what's shot in sleep, he talks about sleeping. He says, "Shanasan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Adam b'tivoi sheyashan כדי שיעלה נשמתו לישיבה של מעלה, ושם מגלם לו רזי תורה, מה שאי אפשר לאדם ללמוד ב70 שנה ללמוד שם בשעה אחת. It's amazing what one can learn. The neshama learns and it goes up, as opposed to if he's awake down here. So like this, so Kemuvan, I would say that it's not necessarily for all of us regular, at least for myself. I don't believe I'm learning in my sleep. I'm sleeping in my sleep. So therefore, the point is, the Gedolim, when they slept, we understand what's going on. But just because they were sleeping, it does not necessarily mean we can sleep. So just because we find that Arizal did, okay, Arizal. And Lamaisa, Lamashal, we find certain Gedolim said, Lamashal Chaim Kain, in the Tor Berekas, Talmud of Reb Chaim Vital, he says, you should not sleep, you should be Isaac and Torah, and that's what the minhag is. Lamashal, there's Rabbi Yisrael Lingi, V'nahakti shaloi lishin klal, afil achatzos. The Chidah writes about himself, and he was well aware of what the Arizal's Anhaga was. He writes in his Chibur Avodas HaKodesh, and he writes we have different Mushimas of his Anhagas. He did not sleep on Rosh Hashanah at all. We find also the Nazir Shimshon writes, according to the Rama, shaloi lishin Rosh Hashanah, who kol hayoim, not to sleep. Okay. Lamaisa, the Mata Ephraim, which is Rabbi Ephraim Zal Margolis, the Chibur that many people rely on for the Hilchos Yom Neram, he says, when he's talking, even though, let's say you can eat the Suda and then there's time to sleep a little until Mincha, Ein Lasses Kain, and you should be Chayshish, Lamash Amr HaYashan, Rosh Hashanah, Gam Mazli Yashan. Now then he says, key words, Afshe Devreim Nemar Beremiza, Shamishi Yashan Ein Moisif, Oymitz Betfila, Gam Mazli, Shua Malach HaMelitz Alav, Shamayim, Einim Elamitz Chusalav. But he says, still, you should learn. And this is what the Mata Ephraim says one should do. He talks about saying Tehillim, the whole Tehillim, which is a whole minhag, so saying a lot of Tehillim on the Rosh Hashanah. Earlier we find the Seder Yom says the same thing, not to sleep on Rosh Hashanah during the day. Fine. But Lamaisa, many people are Mekel. So the truth is, just to point this out, a lot of times today when you ask this question, a Hasidic person doesn't even understand the Shaila. His davening, he comes, he's right before Shkia. He's barely even able to make Kiddush. Many people that daven in certain yeshivas also, they finish Mamish right before Shkia. So they don't even understand this whole dian of this conversation. It's sort of like not a Lamaisidic conversation. Anyway, Lamaisa, the Magen Avraham over here says, he brings down the Arizal, and he says, Arizal Omar, she'achar chatzos muter lishoin, she'kfar nesayr hamalach ha'yidei atfilas vatiyas. So this changes everything. The Magen Avraham is saying that the Arizal said one could sleep. I mean, to say, maybe you can't bring me a ride from the Arizal's Hanagas B'chlal. And maybe even you're going to tell me that Arizal was learning in his sleep. But here, the Magen Avraham is saying that the point is, at least the way the nusach that he had of this Arizal, that the Arizal was passing its mutter to sleep. Now, there's a few points that one needs to be made. Number one, and then he brings down, the Magen Avraham brings down that the from the Bach that the Rami Rutenberg slept. But then he says, Hayoshev batul ki yashin dami. But and some people just sat and did nothing, klutz around. That's also worthless. Now, the question is, where is the Arizal, the way the Magen Avraham brings it down, and that's a mystery. Although we know most of the Arizals that the Magen Avraham quotes where they're from, this one we're so far unable to find. Lamaisa, another point over here is, in general, is who said the Arizal is dealing with the Yerushalmi. The Arizal is the same time as the Rama. The Rama is not out yet. Mechatesa, he saw there's no indication that he could have seen that he did see the Rabbi Shueib and Shueib. So who said he even knew about the Yerushalmi? And when one looks carefully into the various Makairis that talk about in the Arizal from Reb Chaim Vital about Rosh Hashanah and sleeping on Rosh Hashanah, that it's mutter after Chatzos, there's no mention of the Yerushalmi. It talks about whatever happens on Rosh Hashanah in these Kabbalistic terms way above my pay grade. And then says Reb Chaim Vital and all the different Nischais and all the different things that one could, or even as far as the Magen Avraham says it, that one can sleep after Chatzos. Fine. Lamaisa, Lamashal, when one looks in the various Noisa Kalim, you could see everyone has, many people bring down, like this Magen Avraham, that one could sleep and how to understand it. Just to point one Maramakam over here, the Machzor Shekel, when he talks about it, he says like this. He says it's based on the Yerushalmi, and then he says, what's the pshat in the Yerushalmi? Adam Isaac with divrei Torah tefillah ma'ir malach shaloi l'mayil l'spalav. That's what happens. That's what it means. Mazel be'etzem. And when one's sleeping, that doesn't happen because we're not, obviously, to point out, we're not Arizal who's learning in our sleep. If when you're awake and you're battling, so then the malach is also not acting. So then it might be kedai too. If you're just going to waste time, it might be kedai to go to sleep. Anyway, fine. L'maisa, after everything is said and done, it sounds like there's something much more greater going on over here, and that's what I believe is happening, and that's why the Rama is madgish over here, where something that he does not say anywhere else, and that he says is a miring nachon, not to sleep. And that is as follows. When one starts learning Hilchas Rosh Hashanah, you see that the day is full of contradictions. L'mashal, on one hand, we find people are noig to have a lot of sudas. L'mashal is a lashon and taisis marbim besuda lases siman yafa, and it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. Oichlim v'shaisim v'sameichen. Says the Mishnah Brura, Avshu Yaimadin, still there's something known as V'samachta b'chagecha. There's a mitzvah, according to some, to be of Simcha Rosh Hashanah like all Yom Tovim. Not only that, everyone points to a psukim that says, V'yoymer lehem l'chu echlu mashmanim v'shesu mamtakim v'sholchu manis le'nachon like ki kaddish hayoyim. So it's talking about eating, and what are you eating? Mashmanim. Okay. Halal. Do we say halal or not? So the famous Gemara. Amar Bavo, Amar Malach, Shar Stefan Hagash Baruch Hu. Rabban Shalom Neima, Ein Yisrael Im Shiur Lefanecha BeRosh Hashanah Yom Kippur Alam Efsher Melech Yoshev Al Kisei Din V'Sifrei Chaim V'Sifrei Beisim Suchim Lefanav V'Yom Yisrael Yom Shira. The kitzur, why do we say Shira? Is because Pashtus has to do with some type of Simcha. So on Rosh Hashanah, when the Sifrei Din and everything is happening, you're going to be saying Shira? I don't understand. We just got finished saying Marbim Besuda. Make up your mind. There's some type of stira. Another anhaga, eating meat. So we just read the pasuk Achlu Mashman V'Shesumam Taken. Mamaisa in the Gemara in Chulin, one of the Arab prakim, the time of the year that one's supposed to have behemoths and eat them, meat, pashtos, is one of them is Rosh Hashanah. Yet we know the Malach of the Beis Yosef told them not to eat meat, and this is a whole arichos nifla, what the story behind it is. So what's going on? Is it, do you or don't you do these things? Another thing we have, the Marshal had on Haga not to eat fish on Rosh Hashanah. Why not? There's a mitzvah of Simcha. Another halacha we find in halacha already brought down, and we showed him about this, that they did not, normally they daven bechriya, which means is they slouch down. Some people the whole Shemona Esrei, some people even the whole davening. There's a whole shmooze about this in halacha, we showed him and onwards. Why? So the Mishnah Brewer already explains. Okay, so there's some type of thing of Eiman Yira. Another anhaga, fasting. Up till now, I said there's in Marba Besuda, and some people eat even meat. But there's other Mekairis from Goinim and Rishainim that some people are Mishabeach, one should fast on Rosh Hashanah. So because of the steers going on back and forth, is it a Yom Simcha or is it not? Another thing, some people wear kittel or Big Day Lavan. And in Big Day Lavan, Pashtos, it has to do with it to remind us of Big Day Mesim. So is it so what's the day of Rosh Hashanah? So this is part of this is a great mystery of Rosh Hashanah. When one learns Rosh Hashanah, the halachos, back and forth, you could find Makairis each way and different anhagas. And not only that, even the different anhagas could be interpreted different ways, and each one is its own bazundere shmuz. The truth is that already from Elul, we're focused on the din. Kiyadua, Yisrael Salanter is famous for saying that used to be that people, as soon as they heard the call of, when they said Elul, whether it was during Rosh Chodesh benching or whatever the nuschayos that you had, or the famous stories of people fainting, already from the beginning of Elul, people's mind was focusing on the great din that's about to happen. And Rosh Hashanah was a yom of din. Lamashal Reb Shrei Deblitzky wrote a sefer called Bechein Tzadikim, where he collects from all different svarim the anhagas of many different Gedolim throughout Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Asar Simei Tshuva, the anhagas, and we see the focus for many Gedolim was they were thinking about the din the whole time. And Memela, they were very, some people had, Lamashal had Tainis Libor, and numerous long lists of anhagas. But the point is, okay, but what is, I as I'm pointing out, there seems to be some type of confliction over there. Lamashal, the Malbim and Tehillim and Parak Pei Aleph, he also points to this, that a shofar, even a shofar, on one hand, it's supposed to scare you. But let's say in the Beis HaMikdash, when they on Rosh Hashanah, when they did it, when they blew the shofar, it was not to scare you. Furthermore, he points to the psukim we mentioned, Achluma Shmanim. So Rosh Hashanah also, it's basically, is it a day of Ema or is it a day of Simcha? And the answer is that there's a Gila Virada, and it's supposed to be somehow at this a mixed Hanhaga. I mean, say you're supposed to be chap and realize and integralize that it's a Yom Adin. At the same time, and that Hashem Yisbarach is dining on life and on Parnasa and all different things. At the same time, there's also supposed to be a level of Simcha. And this Avodah is a very, very hard Avodah. Lamaisa, because on one hand, because of this concept that there is supposed to be you're supposed to be fearing, you have a fear that it is the aim of the din. So there were different anhagas that Gedolim had. And some Gedolim, they took upon themselves different anhagas. L'mashal the marshal, he didn't eat fish because he didn't want to be, he enjoyed fish. We have Makairis about that. So he didn't want to forget the aim of din. And different people, that's what they did. That's what the same thing with the kittel. That's what's going on over here with Shina the Rosh Hashanah. A lot of times, when you look at, let's say, Rosh Hashanah, so what's Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah there's the shofar and davening. And then there's all these different types of minhagim. The minhagim start with, whether it's with the simanim, Maaglei, Rosh Hashanah, whether it's tashlach, all these different things. For many people, the minhag, even though the minhagim are secondary, a lot of them have much later sources. It's not about the shofar, which is the din deraisa, or the tefillah, davening for the din. A lot of times the minhagim, that's what helps the hamoin am, so to speak, get into the yontif. And to feel, so it's not pshat that Shina Rosh Hashanah is an Isser. When one looks at all the Makairis over here, most of the Makairis don't say the words Asr. They say, just to quote, just the main early source that we quoted is the Rama. The Rama does not use the words Asr. And even when he brings down the Yerushalmi, what does he say? Not an Isser, and the point is, but sleep, very simple. If I tell you that you can't eat meat, big deal. Say you'll eat chicken, or some people don't care so much. I tell you, let's say fish. Some people, I don't like fish, big deal. Sleeping is very important for most people. So I tell you can't sleep and you can't take your nap on Shabbos afternoon. For some people, that's already a way how they feel the day, so to speak. So that's pashtus. It's a possibility. It's not about the action. It's about what's supposed to be the teitzah. What comes from it? What comes from it is I'm now being margish the yoim hadin. I'm not sleeping. Now, what are you supposed to do? Oh, that's a great question. You're not supposed to just waste time. That's what the whole emphasis. If you can be yoshev batal, it's worthless. You're supposed to be learning or saying Tehillim. And there's a ton of Makairis, a whole shmooze about, not for a different episode, about saying Tehillim, finishing Tehillim already. Some people have the minhag from already the beginning of Elul. Some people say Tehillim over it's a whole sefer Tehillim over Rosh Hashanah. There's a lot about that. Another thing is learning Torah. So again, I said, it's funny, is that if you look in Yeshiva Welt, davening of Rosh Hashanah ends very late. Chassidish Welt ends very late, mamish close to Shkia, so there's no time to even learn. But if you look, there's a famous Drasha of the Ramban. The Ramban gave his Drasha on Rosh Hashanah, and it for sure took hours to say. Even if you want to make up a daichik, possibly that it was done over maybe more than 1 year, but it's clear there was plenty of time. It wasn't done in the break for 10 minutes. Similarly, this Rabbi Yeshua ben Shueib, his Drasha that's a makar for sleeping Rosh Hashanah, it's a whole arichos that he gave on Rosh Hashanah. It's clear from the whole thing, and it's pages. It's fascinating Drasha. It took a long time to say over. There's no question that they would say that they were learning that Rosh Hashanah in those days there was something about it, and part of it is it created great schusim. Now, go into this even a drop more. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Shueib, and that's part of what to bring this point out. I'm going to do it through Rabbi Yeshua ben Shueib. Rabbi Yeshua ben Shueib has this drasha over here about Rosh Hashanah. So what does he do? Many times he begins with a pasuk in Tehillim. Over here he deals with Parak Pei Aleph, which we know many people link it already, and the Gemara already links it to Rosh Hashanah. So now he starts out with a kasha. That kasha is a bomb kasha, which many people ask, and that is, Why does the Torah, when it talks about Rosh Hashanah, which is the Yom Adin, and Mitzvah Shofar, it doesn't talk about it only B'Kitzer Gadol and B'Ramazim? Why isn't it Mefurish? And this is something that this is the theme that he wants to deal with throughout his drasha over here. Now, he has many different, and he's constantly through this drasha, even though he goes off to talk about many other things about the Yom Hadin of Rosh Hashanah, he keeps on coming back to this question. And therefore he deals with Shofar, he deals with the Yom Hadin, and he deals with he deals with the Gemara and Brachas that we mentioned the Brachas in Yerches with the Chassid Echad, and he says, interestingly enough, he brings down, some people said it was during a dream. He says no, it was when he was awake and there was a Ruach HaKodesh, and he heard what was being said. And this is a whole Havana in Ruach HaKodesh Seder. Anyway, and he talks about the conflicting things that are going on in this day. Is it a day of Simcha or is it a day of Ema and Din? And it's Mechusa. That's the whole point that he says. He brings down Lamashal, the Shamanu Shebedairis HaChasidim HaRishayim HaHiroyim Dvarim Mavilim VeShoyim Kailis Maridim V'Yesh Mizeh Remez B'Midrashos. Before his time, that they heard there was unbelievable things that were happening, scary things, Kailis Maridim on Rosh Hashanah, and which is, I don't even know how to explain that. Lamashal, he brings down from the Rashba, his Rebbe, Shamati Arizal, that it's not in our comprehension to understand all the different aspects, and that's why the Torah didn't write about it. And he deals with this also with the Yom Hadin. Fine. Now, in the course of this whole conversation, so he also he has, it's incredible, and as I said, this is definitely not a drasha that he said in 10 minutes. It's a drasha that took hours. He builds it up. He goes into all different topics. You see Yeda in all different things. Lamashal, we mentioned the topic of Kriya during davening. So he brings down the Anhaga of the Rashba. He says, others do it just by Malchis, Rechanis, and Shofars. Then he says, Moiri, Aravzal, Arazra, Yinoi, Bechol HaTfila, L'Shoichas, Kivin Sheshacha, Shuv Lo Yehoya Zoykif Ad Tashnum HaTfila, Kol Zeh Remez L'Trua. This is all Anhaga of his. Again, Viter, to feel the day. That's part of what's going on here. So now, in the course of all this, at one point he brings down towards the beginning. He's so interesting. At one point he's talking about the din of Rosh Hashanah, and he goes by Richos. Also another conversation: is the din on the din achayim? Is it a din on the nefesh, on the guf? And he brings different makairis about it. Again, the sugya in Rosh, he brings up again the sugya in brachas, and then he brings down the kol yachid v'yachid, and then he says, how do I know that it's a din on kol yachid v'yachid? V'chein amr b'Yerushalmi achad barnash tedamich b'rei shaita v'danen yaseh. So we see from this Yerushalmi clearly that it's a din on every yachid, and because the lashon al chad barnash. So here we have a derech agav his usage of the Yerushalmi. Now he already uses Yerushalmi in the beginning of his drasha, and what does he say in the beginning of the Yerushalmi? In the beginning of the drasha, he goes like this. As I said, the question that's bothering him throughout this drasha is, why is it not open? Why is the Torah not open about Rosh Hashanah? So then he brings down a famous Rambam that every Musar Shmuz begins or says somewhere in the Shmuz, Kibitkiya Shofar Yesh Remez Ledin. K'may Uri Shenim Mi Daschem. Okay, this is a kitzur of the Rambam, and therefore you blow Shofar to wake one up. Then he says, and we can't kasu be Yerushalmi she'aser la'adam she'yashem b'Rosh Hashanah. So here he uses a lashon of aser. Kidamrinan hasam hach barnash tedamich b'rei shaita va'oiskim v'dina. They're being oising in his din le'el shumayra atzla d'chsiv malachad nirdoim. There's a din going on upstairs about you, and you're sleeping. This is showing atzlos. So it's not. So here, in the course of the drasha and the course of the context of the whole story, what's happening is, and he's building it off with going further from the Rambam, he's dealing with this derech agav to answer his question, what is bothering him, and that is why the Torah does not say openly about Rosh Hashanah. And the point is that we see over here there's an akuda of atzlos, that you meira atzla. Now, going further, the Shla, interestingly enough, says as follows. He brings down the Yerushalmi, Moiratzla, and the Shla had the Chibur Rabbi Shuba and Shueib. We know this from other places. And then he says, "V'nir delav dafke yoshin mamish, elafilo arvi yoshe batal." If you stand just doing nothing, beinim avakish al nafshe betfilo tachnunim yoshin mikri, it's considered sleeping. Va'adamu loylam bein arbein yoshin. If you're awake and you're not doing anything, that's considered sleeping. That's what shofar does. So we see over here that it's not so much. It's not. It's even though Rabbi Shub and Shueib, as opposed to Rama, uses a lashon of iser, it's the point is it's a moira atzla, and that's what I'm trying to claim. It's part of the feeling of the day. Lamaisa, a different question which relates to all this, and once we're throwing this out there, once we're talking about the shla, is what about other days of Yontif? Is there anything about sleeping Rosh Hashanah, just like sleeping Rosh Hashanah because of the Shas Din? What about other Yom Tovim, which we know, Arba Prakam Olam Nidon? So he tells to already in Emek Bracha, there's the work of his father, published in 1597, also that possibly this Yerushalmi would be related to then also. Okay. Anyway, at this point, we're just going to talk about briefly a few 4 or 5 ha'aras, and that's how we're going to be Messiah. Up till now, and as I said, the basically it is the theme of Rosh Hashanah, and based on this Rabbi Shueib and Shueib, is what? To feel this nakuda that there's a din going on, and that's why the Rama says minig nachon, because this is a great way how one should be concerned, is feeling what is Rosh Hashanah about, to be awake and be conscious that there's a din going on. Now, so number one, and this goes back to this Yerushalmi, that this with this Rabbi Shueib and Shueib is like this. I asked a question, which is, are there any other sources for this topic? So the question really is, how do we know that there's no Yerushalmi about this? So, of course, today we know we have what's known as the Bar Ilan program and Eitzach Chachma and everything, so you can make searches. But over the years, how did the Gedolim know? So the answer is there were Taka Gedolim, Meshech Hadaris, that they knew that there's no such Yerushalmi. So I'm going to mention very briefly a few Nakudas, and I'm just going to get to 1 or 2 Aris to be Messiah, and that's as follows. Number 1. There are many Yerushalmis that are brought down, it's quotes brought down in the names of Yerushalmis and Rishonim, and that we don't know where they are, where they got lost. Some people suggest, maybe in Yerushalmi and Kachim, if there was. Or the Yerushalmi, as opposed to the Bavli, did not get to us, B'Shleimus, possibly. Okay. There's a Yehuda talks about something about Yerushalmi, and he says we know that the Yerushalmi is not b'shleimus, and even the Yerushalmi even the parts of Yerushalmi that we have. So there's always been a quest amongst people to find lost Yerushalmis. So Lamashal, the Radal in his work Kadmus Hazayir, he talks about it, and he says many times when it says Yerushalmi, it's materials that Rishonim had. It was in Midrashim. Yerushalmi does not mean the Talmud Yerushalmi. It's a way of referring to other Midrashim, and we know many Midrashim are lost. Mertzchayis also has a similar suggestion, and these Gedolim who were experts in Yerushalmi and all Medrash, they already said way before the Bar Ilan such that it didn't exist. Mashal, the Sefer Domestic Eliezer, when he's working on the Bir Agra, he says he looked, he spent time looking for it. Meir La'aretz, all different people, they looked. There's a suggestion, there was a sefer called Sefer Yerushalmi, and this dealt with inyanim of Yerushalayim. And maybe it was there because it had to deal with inyanim Rosh Hashanah. This is a suggestion that some people have, and the point is, Bekitzer Nimratz is many times Yerushalmis were lost, and we don't have them. And it was a fascinating conversation amongst Bekiyim and these type of inyanim. They would deal with trying to locate them, and sometimes they were lucky, sometimes they weren't. One suggestion is that it was suggested by someone, Avigdor Aptovitzer. He noticed that certain chiburim, Ashkenazi chiburim, bring Yerushalmis. So he said, you know what? Maybe there's a chibur, like there's not just the standard Yerushalmi. Maybe there's a chibur that was like additions added from a different point in time, and that's what these Rishonim had, and it was called Yerushalmi because it was additions on the Yerushalmi. You say it was a later Haggais onto the Yerushalmi. He made such a suggestion because he saw Lamashal in the Chibar Rav Yad that he brings a lot of Yerushalmis, and we don't have it. It was like there's too many times that it's happening already. So he thought maybe there's such a thing. Lamaisa, he did discover such a work, but over there, at least parts of this work was discovered, and we don't have the Makar for the Yerushalmi on Rosh Hashanah there either. Anyway, the point is, without getting into all the very boring details of this, many people have been hunting for it, writing about it, seeking it out, and they were not able to find it. Okay, now let's just move on to the, I keep on saying this, to the last points of this conversation. The Temimah. Temimah is famous for having interesting chaps, so he wanted to suggest like this, that the Yerushalmi is referring to, it sounds strange that there's an Isser to sleep, or it's not proper to sleep on Rosh Hashanah. Okay. He says the Damech means someone dies, and the Pirish was, and the Pshat in the Yerushalmi is, if someone dies by Rosh Hashanah, it means is that his mazel, he had bad mazel, and it has nothing to do with sleeping on Rosh Hashanah. Obviously, this is a chiddush nifla that some people don't really like, because Lamaisa, the fact is that the Damech means in numerous places to sleep. It doesn't mean to die. Okay. The Marshal is a Chibur Meshivas Nefesh. He has a whole arichos about it. He says, Chas v'shalom, really, to say such a thing. He's a fan of the Torah Temimah. He wrote a whole Chibur on Torah Temimah, but the Torah Temimah loved this pshat of his, and he said it in numerous places in his writings. And he felt it has nothing to do with sleeping, it has to do with someone who dies in Rosh Hashanah. That's the whole story, what it's talking about. Lamaisa, interestingly enough, Reb Chaim Kanievsky in Time of the Kra, he has a small, cute piece about it. He brings down this, and he also, we know, he knew Yerushalmi, we don't have it. Fine. He says, what does it mean, damayich? He says, it means sleeping. And then he says like this. It says, man de damich. It doesn't say dainim, and it means like this. If you're dafka b'shoichev lishon, someone goes to sleep, but if someone went to Beis Medrash to learn and then he falls asleep over his sefer, then it's not a problem. And which is a great kula. You go to yeshiva, you go to learn, and you hope you're not going to fall asleep, but you got up early, so you fall asleep. Then maybe it's a problem. But the point is that's how Chaim Kanievsky deals with this aspect. Okay, hold on. I mentioned that part of the questions are, what about the? Okay, so I apologize. Wait 1 second. Yeah, I want to be messiahing with 4 brief nakudas. Nakuda number 1 is, if the whole nakuda is the shas din, so really you should, as soon as the day begins, forget about the night. We already dealt with the night. As soon as the day begins, that's when one should get up. So already the Mati Yehuda Hayash, or Sefer that the Mishnah brings a few times, he says taka from Amud HaShachar. Maybe that's when, because that's when the din starts. L'maiser Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Kedarke B'Kodesh has a gewaldige chap. He says like this: sleeping is, what's sleeping? You mean mezalzel in the kedushas hayom. That's only if you go to sleep while possibly during the day when the din's going on. If you went to sleep at night and you don't get up, you're not being mezalzel in the day, because you went to sleep when it was mutter to go to sleep. Because obviously his hanacha is that at night it's not a problem. And we have a famous thing of Reb Shlomo Zalman. He held that if, let's say, and we have other places where he's makel about it, but the point is he has a nukuda, there's a famous psak of his, over here. Let's say there was a sukkah, and there wasn't enough place for people to sleep. So what do? So he said, once someone falls asleep, there's no more mitzvah for him to sleep in the sukkah, you take him out. So the point is, there's a certain way of looking at sleeping. So when you went to sleep, you were allowed to sleep. There wasn't a problem of the din. So now that you're sleeping and it's already alois, you don't have to wake up. That was on the psak of Reb Shlomo Zalman. There's others that say you should get up. Okay, fine. What about during the second day? So here we have numerous sources, but it refers back to the Gemara and Brachas. Chassid halach lalam bebeis hakfar, says the Gra. When was this? Leil Rosh Hashanah of Leil Sheni de Rosh Hashanah. That's when it didn't stop. And this goes into, this is all the Makairis that there is by Riches Nifla. If you say Shana Tova Message to your friend on the second night of Rosh Hashanah. The Simanim of Rosh Hashanah, is it the first night or is it also the second night? Numerous sources that say the second night. The question is, how's the din? What's the second day of Rosh Hashanah? Bottom line is, the Mashur of Nasanadler also held that for sure after Chatzayis of the second day, it's much more cool to sleep, to be able to sleep. The point that I'm bringing out is, with Shin Rosh Hashanah of the second day, is that it shifts and it's totally in the holistic question of when the din is. three other points. One is a din about Tenachashu, which relates to the eating the samanim and all these things that we're doing for samanim, which Rama puts this into the hilchos of the samanim, the Chuvas Rav Polim. I got a lot of flack from many people about the episode of understanding Agada Rabbi Rechan. I didn't quote the Ben Yehoyada. The reason is I hope one day to deal much greater length with just the Sefer Ben Yehoyada. So for now, I have to be Masakin my Aveira, and he has a Gevaldik Tshuva in Rav Polim where he's Mako, and he specifically talks about Shina Rosh Hashanah that it's not a problem Loisanachshu. Okay? One other fascinating reason behind the Isser Shina is found in the Mata Yehuda, which you just quoted earlier. He says like this: normally, it's brought down in halacha. You're not supposed to take a nap during the day. Why not? You're not supposed to sleep more than Shina Sasus, which is Shishin Nishmi. So normally, the whole year we're Mako. Aserisi made Tshuva. Everyone knows in Simon Tafresh Gimel that what is halacha nati pas palterin, and you're supposed to take on extra chumras. So we take on the extra chumrah of Simon Dalid of not sleeping during the day, and you should not sleep during the day of Rosh Hashanah. A very geschmacka reason. Obviously, I went down a terrible rabbit hole with that. And now to be Messiah. New evidence. So always centuries could go by and we don't have any new evidence about this topic, but here we do. And a few years ago, published in the Chitze Gibayim journal that came out from Lakewood, volume 11, Aaron Moskowitz makes a discovery. It seems to be a Talmud of Maril, a massive collection, hundreds of pages of all different anhagas of that all year round. Over there, he makes the following discovery. It says like this. It's talking about the din of Rosh Hashanah, again with that night also, which is a whole arichos, which we just mentioned, touched on, and he says like this: "V'loy dan Yisrael el b'shasha iskem b'mitzvah shenemar v'lamim b'misharim l'kach noigen shaloi lishim Rosh Hashanah. V'alzei yaser apayit b'mishpatim hagoyim b'li l'shaftei." And then then the Matik also brings down. So we see already over here some form early work. This is from 1386, talking about not sleeping Rosh Hashanah. So this is after the Rabbi Shueib and Shueib, but this is now an Ashkenazi source, and this possibly could be where the Rama got it from. Why? Because later on in this Chibur, he brings down Isa ben Medrash, not Yerushalmi, Chad Barnash, the Damach Berei Shaita, Tachas Diklei, Shama Kol Barash Diklei, Chazi Barnash, Damach, all those things, and he talks about Mazli Damech, your Mazel is going to be, who's going to be Melis for your Mazel, and then he says, Mekan Smach Sheni Shanim Rosh Hashanah. So we see this Yerushalmi brought down its B'Shema Medrash in a work from 1386, and the point is like this. Up till now, we only had a Svardi source, and we said, oh, Rabbi Shueib and Shueib, the Rama might not have known it. Now we could see possibly that the Rama might have had work that comes out of the Beis Medrash, the Maril, and we know the Rama and the Maril, he was very fond of the Maril. Anyway, to be Masakim like this is to be Masakim the whole sugi like this. It comes out, Rosh Hashanah is a tremendous day. There's a lot happening in the day, and we need to do things that help us feel the day, and that's why there's all different contradictory minhagim, and they're all about to try to bring this contradictory feeling. On one hand, there's a din going on, but we're also supposed to be besimcha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be come and find us and let us live and have parnasa and all the different things that we ask for. But the way to feel this is through the different, for us hamoinam, not for the great Gedolim, was through the different minhagim, and one such minhag was not to sleep on Rosh Hashanah. Again, not necessarily at night, not necessarily to get up early in the morning, not just the second day. These are all much more huladik, so to speak. It's not an isser, as I'm pointing out. It's a way to feel the Yom Hadin and to conclude. What should one do? One should be saying Tehillim. There's plenty of early Makayos Rishayim, or learning. Learning is always the best. As I said, the Ramban gave that Drasha. Trust me, they learned plenty on Rosh Hashanah in those days. I can for today.
Okay, excellent. We appreciate this beautiful, wonderful episode. We thank the sponsors once again, Rabbi Yisrael Gordon, who dedicated this episode in honor of Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brut for his collecting and writing the works of Rav Moshe Reiner Zatzal, and Rabbi Brut will surely, he has mentioned him in the past, and will surely get to him again in the future.